So this is what we're making, an oval profile shank with a pattern and a hammered finish. So get your ring size. You can use an existing ring if you have one. Once you get the ring that fits you, measure the inside diameter. This one is 18 millimeters, and it's a P1/2. Now you need to add the thickness of your wire, multiply by 3.14, and that will give you your length. Now we're starting with 3 millimeter round wire. Cut it to the length that you come up with, that your calculations come up with. And you can just chop it. Because what we're doing will make it longer, and then you can trim the ends off later. So I have a small set of bolt cutters that I use for that, quite handy. But they always will give you a tapered cut on the end that you have to deal with later. So when you just chop your material, you have to know that you're going to have to tidy it up later. So what we're going to do now is make this oval, and if you have a rolling mill, just roll it through the rolling mill until it's 1.5 millimeters high. So it's half the original diameter. If you don't have a rolling mill, you can just take a planishing hammer or a shiny ball peen hammer and you can hammer it on a steel block or on an anvil. Now, if you're going to, sorry, I have one way that thing fits in my wooden block. So if you're going to hammer this on your block with the hammer, I would use the slightly rounded end of the planishing hammer. Take your time, don't kill it. We want a nice, fairly smooth surface. And like I say, we want it to be half the original diameter, so that's 2.6. So I'm just going to do one end and then turn it around and do the other end. .3. And I think I'll stop there. That looks pretty nice. So that's 2 millimeters, and you can see how wide it is compared to the 3 millimeters that we started with. So go ahead and do the whole length. And one of the reasons I like doing this with the hammer is the pattern that I get on the edge of the ring. You can see how it's kind of ripply. I really like that. And then what we're going to do, when we get this whole length hammered, we're going to turn this so that the flat side is up, and we'll be putting our pattern in the flat side. So the inside of our ring will be slightly ripply, but that's all right, because we'll have a nice smooth flat side where it's been against the steel block. We'll have that nice flat side to work with to put our pattern in. So now you have your ring shank. Now, just using the hammer, the slightly rounded side of the planishing hammer, our ring shank is now 15 millimeters longer than when we started. So measure the length of your ring shank on the back of your material. Make sure you come far enough in that you get rid of the damaged end. And just mark it with a texture, because we're going to put our pattern on and we don't want to go over the end. So the texture will just show us where to go. And it can be fairly rough, fairly quick and dirty, within a millimeter. Now, if you make a mistake with your texture, Sharpie, you can use methylated spirits. I think they call it isopropyl alcohol in the US, and it just comes off. Now, before you put your marks on there to delineate your shank length, you need to anneal it, because we've really work hardened it by hammering it, and if it's annealed, then it'll take a pattern quite easily. So now that it's annealed, put your texture mark on, and I'm just using a little punch that I made it's a small star shape, and it's just so that I can have a fairly deep, simple impression on the smoother side of our ring shank. So once again, I'm just using my steel bench block, and don't put your impression right on the very end, because we're going to cut this to length and solder. If you put the impression right on the end, you'll sand it off. So what I'm going to do is just come in about 4 millimeters. And you can see my little mark. So make it fairly deep. You can make as many marks as you want, or as few. But like I say, try to get them fairly deep. And now we'll cut this to length. Now I'm going to hallmark this. Now, and it's just so I don't forget later on. And I always put my hallmark opposite my solder joint, so if I put it in the middle of this shank, it will be opposite. Lovely. So just saw slightly to the right of your mark. And file it flat, and I use a Swiss number 2 cut, flat hand file. Look at it against the safe side of your file, make sure it's nice and flat. And I said cut to the right. What I should have said is just cut to the outside of the mark, because if you're left-handed, you'll be sawing on the left side. And make sure that you have the correct length. Lovely. Well, 60 millimeters, that's pretty close to 60 millimeters. So you always want to make sure that you measure it before you bend it around to solder it, because if it's slightly off, if you've cut it slightly short, what you can do is you can hammer it again and it'll make it slightly longer. Anyway, at this point we're just going to use our flat half-round pliers and bend this into an oval. Don't grab the very end and put the half-round on the inside. If you grab the very end, it'll distort the metal and you won't get a good solder join. So into an oval, and that's just so that we can get a nice flat join. So work it until you have as perfect a join as you can get. Now, when you don't have your little pattern very close to your join, you can put your solder either on top or on the inside. It doesn't really matter. So I'll leave it up to you. So I think I'll put my solder on top. So mix up your flux. Make sure that the clear liquid on top is mixed in. Flux the join, top and bottom. And I'm going to use about a 2 millimeter long piece of hard solder. And I'm going to pick it up with my solder pick. Dry out the flux, and I'm also heating from the top. It doesn't really matter. So when the flux goes clear, place your solder. And once it flowed, I also heated it from the underneath to make sure that it flowed all the way through. So quench in water. Have a look at your join. You should be able to see the solder on the inside where it's come through. And we'll pickle. Now, I pickle in sodium bisulfate. You can use a myriad of different pickles: citric acid, sulfuric acid, nitric acid, sodium bisulfate, alum. I mean, there's almost an endless number of pickles that you can use. I like sodium bisulfate because it's a salt and it's readily available in pool supply businesses. And that's it. So when you come out of the pickle, dry it off, round it up on your ring mandrel using your rawhide hammer or a wood hammer or a plastic hammer, as long as it's not metal. So after you've rounded it up, sand the join, sand the sides, sand the inside, and I'm just using a split mandrel on my handpiece with 400 grade weathered dry paper. And if you did a good job, it won't take you very long to tidy it up. Lovely. So now we're back on our ring mandrel, and I'm just going to use my jeweler's hammer, which is a slightly rounded end, and check your size, because I'm starting a size and a half smaller, and I'll work my way to the proper size. Now, as you hammer it, it's going to get bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hammer that edge, turn it around, hammer that edge, and then I'm going to hammer the middle. And once you get to your starting point, flip it over. Now this is just decoration, so you don't have to kill it. Watch your size. Make sure you don't go past your size. So I'm still about half a size small, so that's good. Perfect. Now, when you're working with your ring stick, what you want is the mark for the size that you're working for to be in the center of your ring if it's a wide ring like this one. So if your ring is on the edge of the mark, it's not quite that size yet. So, like I say, the mark needs to be in the middle. So, now you can see that we have our little decorations on there, and we have a nice hammered finish. So that's it. It's finished, with the exception of polishing. Now, I'm just going to put it in the tumbler for 10 or 15 minutes, and it'll be done.